There is a reason the universe gave you two ears and one mouth, so that you might learn twice as much as you speak. The first act of wisdom is silence, and the first act of mastery is observation. The man who cannot be silent cannot think, the man who cannot listen cannot grow, and the man who will not learn cannot lead. The greatest failures in life do not come from lack of opportunity, they come from lack of awareness. Most men move through life deafened by their own noise. They speak before they think, react before they reflect, and demand before they deserve. They confuse talking for knowing, noise for power, and speed for progress. But the law of success is patient and deliberate. It does not respond to chatter, it responds to clarity. Success begins the moment you stop talking long enough to hear truth, the quiet voice of reason, the whisper of purpose, the law of cause and effect that governs every hidden dimension of achievement. Those who fail, fail because they drown in their own voices. They resist stillness because stillness exposes their confusion. But silence, when mastered, becomes the channel through which understanding flows. When you stop talking, you begin to listen. When you listen, you begin to learn. When you learn, you begin to think. And when you think, truly think, you begin to rise. Talking is easy. Listening is discipline. Talking feeds the ego. Listening feeds the mind. Talking reveals impulse. Listening reveals intelligence. The man who listens deeply develops power others cannot imagine, for he learns to hear not only words, but motives. He hears between the lines, beneath the tone, beyond the surface. The world belongs not to the loud, but to the alert. It is not the one who argues best who wins, but the one who perceives most, for perception precedes power. Every master of success has been a master listener, not to gossip, but to guidance, not to flattery, but to fact, not to noise, but to nature. Listen to life itself. Every circumstance speaks. Every result is a voice. Success speaks in the language of law. Failure whispers correction. Wealth speaks in discipline, poverty and neglect. Opportunity speaks in observation, regret in distraction. The wise learn to interpret these voices. The foolish talk over them. To talk constantly is to live in reaction. To listen deeply is to live in creation. One responds to emotion, the other to principle. One reacts to the surface, the other listens to the source. This is the first principle of mastery. He who controls attention controls destiny. Listening is the art of directing attention inward, of training the mind to observe before it acts, to think before it speaks, to choose before it moves. Every mistake in life is a product of premature expression. Every disaster of emotion begins as undisciplined speech. If you wish to transform your world, begin by governing your tongue. For the tongue is the instrument of thought, and words are the children of the mind. Every word you speak sets energy in motion, constructive or destructive, healing or harmful. The undisciplined speak carelessly and then wonder why confusion surrounds them. The disciplined speak deliberately, and watch harmony follow. It is a strange irony of life that the more a man knows, the less he needs to say. The greatest minds speak little because they are too busy building. Their silence is not ignorance, it is focus. They do not broadcast intention, they embody it. They do not announce power, they radiate it. Remember this law: talking spends energy, listening accumulates it. The man who cannot stop talking dissipates his force. He leaks potential through speech. But the one who listens, truly listens, gathers insight, gathers wisdom, gathers command. His silence is a treasury. His restraint is a fortress. Do not mistake silence for weakness. Silence is a weapon sharper than argument, stronger than persuasion. The man who can remain calm and silent while others panic already possesses authority. In his stillness lies strength, and in his observation lies foresight. When you stop talking, you begin to hear more than words, you hear reality. You see patterns where others see events. You detect principles where others see problems. You discern cause where others see coincidence. That is the secret of all mastery: to see, to listen, to interpret. You cannot govern a world you do not understand, and you cannot understand a world you will not listen to. Now, understand this truth. Listening is not merely an act of hearing others, it is the act of hearing yourself. The quiet voice within you speaks constantly, but most drown it with noise. The undisciplined mind fears silence because silence exposes truth. It reveals weakness, confusion, fear, and illusion. But only through silence can you transform them. The man who sits in solitude long enough to face himself will discover the architecture of genius. Within every mind lies a blueprint of greatness, but only the still mind can read it. The law of life is simple. You cannot receive while you are speaking. The mouth that talks cannot feed. The mind that argues cannot learn. The ego that defends cannot grow. The disciplined mind, however, opens itself to higher instruction, to intuition, to observation, to wisdom that flows from the unseen dimension of order. This is what Napoleon Hill called the mastermind principle, the power that arises when two or more disciplined minds harmonize toward truth. But harmony begins in silence. You cannot unite minds that are too busy competing for attention. Unity begins with humility, and humility begins with listening. To stop talking and listen is to position yourself in alignment with law. For nature rewards not the loud, but the receptive. The soil does not shout at the rain, it opens to it. The wise man does not argue with truth, he aligns with it. The student does not debate the teacher, he absorbs. Every man's success is limited only by his capacity to receive instruction. You may be gifted, intelligent, and ambitious, but if you cannot listen, you will remain small. For every great idea you will ever need already exists waiting to be heard, but only a still mind can hear it. Silence is the birthplace of clarity, and clarity is the foundation of discipline. You cannot command yourself until you can hear yourself. You cannot hear yourself until you can silence yourself. So learn to be still. Let the noise of the world fall away until your own thoughts become audible. Listen not with impatience, but with curiosity. Listen not for entertainment, but for enlightenment. For the truth that changes your life will never shout, it will whisper. And only those who stop talking long enough to listen will ever hear it. When you become quiet enough to hear the laws that govern your mind, you begin to see that all failure springs from inner noise. The undisciplined man lives in a storm of thoughts that never rest. His emotions speak over his reason, his impulses interrupt his purpose, his ego debates his conscience. He cannot hear guidance because he will not stop speaking even in his own mind. But the man who trains his mind into silence discovers a hidden power, clarity. Clarity is the birthplace of right decision. No great fortune, invention, or empire was ever built by the confused. Greatness comes from men and women who could silence doubt long enough to think. Thinking is not the same as reacting. Most people never think, they merely rearrange their emotions into words. They argue loudly, but their logic is shallow. They speak quickly, but their minds are scattered. They mistake volume for vision. True thought is slow, deliberate, and deep. It is the art of holding one idea still long enough to understand it from every angle. Silence is the crucible of thought. It burns away distraction and leaves only truth. It takes courage to be quiet because quiet reveals who you are. In stillness, you face your fears, your weaknesses, your self-deception, and that confrontation is the beginning of transformation. The one who cannot endure silence cannot endure truth. Listen carefully. Mastery begins not with ambition, but with awareness. Ambition without awareness is chaos with enthusiasm. You must first understand before you attempt to control. And understanding requires observation. The man who learns to observe his own thoughts gains control of them. The man who watches his emotions learns to direct them. The man who studies his impulses learns to rule them. This is self-awareness, the first step toward self-command. When you stop reacting, you start ruling. There is a universal law that states, energy follows attention. Whatever you give attention to expands. If you focus on fear, fear grows. If you focus on anger, anger multiplies. But if you focus on discipline, discipline strengthens. The world outside you is only a mirror of the world within you. If your inner world is noisy, your outer world will be chaotic. The disciplined man withdraws attention from what weakens him and gives it to what empowers him. He does not talk about problems. He studies causes. He does not speak of limits. He expands vision. He does not repeat frustration. He refines philosophy. To stop talking and listen is to redirect power from dispersion to concentration. You stop leaking energy into complaint and start channeling it into creation. You begin to govern thought, and thought begins to obey. Understand this chain of command. The mind is the architect, emotion is the energy, and action is the expression. When the architect is distracted, the building collapses. When the architect is silent and clear, the structure rises. Emotional detachment is the architect's discipline. It is the ability to remain centered while the building shakes. It is the refusal to let passion distort principle. It is calm observation under pressure. The reactive man panics when the unexpected occurs. He loses composure, blames others, and speaks foolishly. But the detached man remains poised. He sees beyond the moment. He listens not to panic, but to pattern. There is no power greater than composure under chaos. It is the signature of leadership and the proof of mastery. When you detach emotionally, you begin to see the truth behind every event. You stop labeling situations as good or bad. You see cause and effect without bias. You understand that what appears as failure is often instruction. You begin to respond with intelligence instead of react with instinct. That is the law of mental neutrality. It is neutrality that gives you control. To be neutral is not to be indifferent. It is to be precise. The surgeon must not tremble when cutting flesh. The investor must not panic when markets move. The leader must not react when followers doubt. The creator must not despair when results delay. Calmness is control. Every emotion left unchecked is a liability. But every emotion disciplined becomes an asset. The man who can feel anger but not be consumed by it can use that energy for persistence. The man who can feel fear but not obey it can use that energy for strategy. The man who can feel passion but not lose himself in it can use that energy for purpose. All emotion is power. Detachment is the filter. This is what Napoleon Hill meant by self-discipline as the bridge between thought and accomplishment. Detachment is not detour, it is direction. To listen deeply to life, to others, to yourself is to recognize the subtle laws that most ignore. You begin to hear how thought shapes reality, how emotion translates into condition, how inner dialogue becomes external destiny. When you listen long enough, patterns reveal themselves. You begin to see that successful people are not lucky, they are lawful. They operate in harmony with principles invisible to the restless mind. Success, in its purest form, is the result of disciplined harmony between mind, emotion, and purpose. You will find that silence is not emptiness, it is access. In stillness, intuition speaks. Intuition is the voice of your higher intelligence, the part of you that sees beyond the horizon of logic. It cannot shout above noise. It whispers through insight. It guides the prepared, but it hides from the distracted. Most never hear it because they never stop speaking long enough to receive it. To cultivate intuition, make silence your ally. Withdraw from the crowd often. Study your thoughts as a scientist studies the stars patiently, objectively, consistently. Write them. Watch them, trace them. You will see that every decision you regret came from emotion, and every victory came from clarity. The undisciplined man says, I should have listened to my gut. The disciplined man says, I always do. Because his gut is not emotion, it is intuition refined by silence. When you stop talking, you begin to listen. When you listen long enough, you begin to understand. When you understand deeply, you begin to control. And when you control yourself, there is nothing left that can control you. That is the essence of mastery. The man who has learned to listen rules every room he enters. He speaks rarely, but when he does, people listen. Why? Because silence gives his words weight. The more you speak, the cheaper your speech. The more you listen, the richer your insight. Every great leader, thinker, and builder has practiced the discipline of silence. Carnegie listened before he commanded. Edison observed before he invented. Lincoln paused before he spoke. The greats understood that words must earn the right to be spoken. Let yours do the same. Before you speak, ask, is it necessary? Is it true? Is it helpful? Does it serve purpose? If not, remain silent. Power gathers in stillness. For silence does not make you smaller. It makes you sharper. Stop talking and listen to the world, to your circumstances, to your conscience, to the law that governs success. Everything is speaking if only you would hear. When you learn to listen, you learn to lead. And when you learn to lead yourself, you no longer need to shout to be heard. The greatest discoveries of the human mind were born not in noise, but in stillness. In that silence, ideas ripened. Newton heard gravity in the fall of an apple because his mind was quiet enough to listen. Edison captured light because his imagination was calm enough to observe darkness. Every revelation that reshaped civilization first appeared as a whisper within a listening mind. The mind that is loud cannot invent, it can only imitate. The man who fills his life with chatter fills his mind with static, and static blocks transmission. The law is absolute. Wisdom cannot dwell in a noisy consciousness. When you stop talking, you become a receiver of insight. You begin to feel ideas forming from the unseen. Inspiration flows toward the prepared, but only the silent are prepared to receive it. That is the meaning of autosuggestion. It is not mystical, it is mechanical. It is the deliberate process of influencing your subconscious mind with thoughts of your own choosing. You are constantly talking to yourself, whether aloud or in silence. Each thought, each statement, each image you repeat is a suggestion to your deeper self. The tragedy is that most people speak chaos into their own souls. They complain inwardly. They criticize themselves. They rehearse fear. They tell their subconscious that they are tired, unlucky, unworthy, and the subconscious obeys because it does not argue, it acts. The disciplined thinker, however, speaks with authority. He does not allow his inner dialogue to drift into disorder. He gives his subconscious only commands that serve his purpose. When the undisciplined say, "I can't," he says, "I will." When they say, "It's impossible," he says, "It shall be done." When they say, "I'm tired," he says, "I am strong." These are not mere words, they are laws. Every command issued with faith and repetition becomes a creative cause. The subconscious translates belief into behavior, behavior into habit, habit into result. This is why silence is so vital. You cannot issue clear commands while drowning in noise. The general of the mind must speak into stillness if he expects his orders to be obeyed. In silence, you can feel the pulse of your own conviction. You begin to recognize which thoughts carry life and which thoughts carry death. For thought is creative energy, subtle but exact. It manifests not according to your wishes, but according to your will. Will is the architect, thought is the blueprint, discipline is the builder. Without discipline, your will crumbles under pressure. Without will, your thoughts scatter without power. This union of will, thought, and discipline produces accurate thinking. It is not enough to think you must think precisely. You must separate fact from fiction, truth from emotion, cause from coincidence. Most people never learn to think accurately because they never learn to listen deeply. They accept rumor as evidence, emotion as fact, assumption as law. They form opinions faster than they form understanding. The result is confusion, and confusion is the breeding ground of mediocrity. Accurate thinking is a form of silence. It is the suspension of judgment until evidence is gathered. It is the ability to observe without distortion. It is the refusal to let excitement, anger, or pride corrupt clarity. The man who practices accurate thinking never rushes, never panics, never assumes. He pauses, listens, analyzes, and then acts. His decisions are few but final. To think accurately, you must master the art of mental detachment. Step outside of your own emotion and examine it as though it belonged to someone else. Ask, is this feeling rooted in fact or fear? Is this conclusion built on evidence or ego? Every time you perform this discipline, you sharpen perception and strengthen control. Emotion, left unchecked, clouds the lens of judgment. But emotion, purified by detachment, becomes fuel for progress. You do not destroy emotion, you direct it. The calm mind feels fully, yet acts wisely. It neither suppresses nor explodes, it channels. The most powerful minds are those that have learned the balance between intensity and control. They feel deeply but express deliberately. Their words carry power because they were forged in silence. This is the difference between the impulsive and the masterful. The impulsive react to every stimulus. The masterful respond only to principle. The impulsive are loud in their uncertainty. The masterful are quiet in their command. To master detachment is to master strength. Detachment does not mean you care less, it means you care correctly. You stop clinging to results and start focusing on cause. You stop demanding outcomes and start directing energy. You become the calm center of every storm. Others lose themselves in chaos. You remain rooted in law. For law is constant, but emotion fluctuates. Understand, emotion is movement. Law is structure. Emotion fuels the fire. Law contains it. Without structure, fire destroys. Within structure, fire illuminates. Discipline is that structure. Detachment is that container. Now consider this. Every man is surrounded by a field of energy, his mental atmosphere. People feel it before they hear him. You can sense peace or turmoil, strength or weakness before a word is spoken. This atmosphere is the vibration of thought and emotion combined. If your inner world is calm, you radiate confidence. If it is chaotic, you project uncertainty. The disciplined listener is magnetic because he emanates composure. People trust calmness because calmness signifies control, and control signifies power. Therefore, silence not only builds inner strength, it builds outer influence. He who listens commands attention. When you listen intently, people reveal themselves. They show their motives, their fears, their desires. You learn more in 1 minute of silence than others learn in hours of debate. This insight is the advantage of the wise. But here is a deeper secret. When you listen beyond words, you begin to hear law itself. The universe is always speaking through results, through rhythms, through cause and effect. The market speaks. The body speaks. Relationships speak. Everything communicates its condition. The wise man listens, interprets, adjusts. The fool ignores, reacts, repeats. This is why failure is never punishment. It is feedback. Every disappointment is the voice of correction. Every delay is the whisper of timing. Every success is the echo of order. The universe does not scream. It signals. Only the still mind can hear it. When you cultivate stillness, your life begins to synchronize with truth. You move with precision, act with certainty, speak with purpose. Noise falls away because you have learned to listen to rhythm instead of rhetoric. The disciplined listener becomes the quiet force that directs chaos into harmony. He leads without shouting, influences without argument, conquers without conflict. That is the real power of silence. It is not passive, it is directive. It is not absence of action, it is mastery of timing. When you stop talking and listen, you align with the law of rhythm, the law that governs expansion and contraction, speaking and silence, giving and receiving. You no longer push against life, you flow with it. And in that flow, life begins to cooperate with you. Silence is not weakness, it is readiness. It is the pause before precision, the gathering of force before release. The river that runs deep makes little sound, but its current moves mountains. So too with the disciplined mind. Its power is quiet, but its reach is immeasurable. When you learn to stop talking and listen, you begin to hear rhythm, the rhythm of timing, opportunity, and intuition. Life, like music, obeys tempo. Those who rush destroy harmony. Those who pause create flow. The master listener moves in rhythm with law. He senses when to act and when to wait, when to advance and when to observe. This sensitivity is what others call luck, but luck is simply the reward of attunement. You cannot hear rhythm while shouting over it. You cannot sense timing while arguing with it. The universe is speaking in order, pattern, and principle always, but only the silent can perceive its beat. The art of success is not constant movement. It is rhythmic mastery. Effort, rest, expression, reflection, speaking, listening, giving, receiving. The undisciplined violate this rhythm. The wise move with it. Those who cannot stop talking force results that should be allowed to unfold. Those who cannot be still destroy miracles before they mature. Listen carefully. Every result you seek already exists in potential form. Your task is not to create it, but to align with it. Listening brings you into that alignment. It reveals the subtle path that talking obscures. Now, understand the highest function of listening. Perception without distortion. When you are detached from emotion and silent in mind, you begin to perceive reality as it is, not as you fear, wish, or imagine it to be. That clarity is rare. Most people live in projection. They do not see, they interpret, they do not observe, they overlay, but the disciplined listener has no filter of ego. He sees without exaggeration, hears without bias, and therefore acts with precision. Precision is the hallmark of all mastery. The surgeon cuts millimeters, the leader speaks one sentence, the strategist moves one piece. The difference between genius and mediocrity lies not in effort, but in accuracy, and accuracy is born of attention. Attention is the purest form of listening. It is focus undiluted by emotion. The undisciplined scatter attention across distractions. The master channels it like a beam. Wherever attention goes, energy flows. To command attention is to command energy. To waste attention is to waste life. You must therefore train your mind to listen without wandering. Listen to one idea until you extract its essence. Listen to one conversation until you grasp its truth. Listen to one principle until you understand its depth. Superficial listening creates superficial success. Deep listening creates mastery. And the one who listens deeply to others will also hear himself. The external act of listening is practice for the internal act of awareness. When you truly listen to others, you silence your inner commentary. You become fully present. And presence, undivided attention, is power. Presence transforms conversation into connection, observation into understanding, and understanding into influence. People follow those who make them feel heard. The leader who listens commands loyalty without demanding it. But this discipline begins long before you listen to others. It begins with listening to yourself. The quiet voice within you, intuition, conscience, inspiration, speaks softly, but it never lies. The tragedy is that most drown it in distraction. They seek answers from others, while ignoring the truth rising within. You cannot lead the world until you can hear your own soul. To hear it, you must create space. Silence is that space. Withdraw from noise daily, not as escape, but as alignment. The undisciplined fear solitude because it exposes emptiness. The disciplined seek it because it renews strength. The world shouts, the self whispers. Those who listen to the whisper become creators. Creation is the final reward of silence. The quiet mind is a womb of ideas. It gives birth to innovation, strategy, poetry, and peace. Noise repeats, silence invents. The most powerful sentences ever written, the greatest discoveries ever made, the most decisive victories ever won, all began in silence. Every plan must first be formed in the invisible before it appears in the visible. That invisible realm is accessed through listening. The inner ear perceives what the outer eye cannot. When you listen deeply, your imagination awakens. You begin to hear possibilities that do not yet exist. You receive direction that logic cannot supply. You start to live by insight rather than impulse. This is not superstition, it is law. The subconscious mind, that silent, unseen partner in every achievement, listens to every thought, every word, every feeling. It obeys not what you wish, but what you believe. It responds not to noise, but to conviction. When you listen long enough to truth, belief is born. Belief is simply sustained listening. It is faith stabilized by repetition. The more you listen to law, the more you trust it. The more you trust it, the more it obeys you. Faith itself is the highest form of listening. Listening without evidence, but with certainty. It is tuning your attention to a reality not yet seen, but already known. And when that tuning becomes unwavering, manifestation follows naturally. The man of faith does not argue. He acts. He does not panic. He prepares. He does not talk about what he is doing. He does it in silence. For silence is not absence. It is power restrained, waiting for perfect timing. If you would become unstoppable, you must master this rhythm. Silence, understanding, action. Most reverse the order. They act first, then speak, then wonder. The wise listen first, then think, then move. This triad creates the architecture of success. The man who listens well moves with accuracy. He does not waste motion or energy. He does not chase opportunity. He aligns with it. He does not need to convince because he understands. And understanding is persuasion without effort. This is the final irony of silence. It makes you heard. When your actions are born of silence, they speak with authority. When your words are forged in quiet conviction, they carry weight. The world listens to the man who listens to himself. Stop talking and listen not to the crowd, not to the noise, but to the pattern behind all things. Listen to the cause behind the effect, the law behind the event, the rhythm behind the chaos. In that listening, you will discover mastery. For success is not a race to speak, it is the discipline to hear what others ignore. When you master this art, you will begin to sense the subtle guidance of intelligence itself, the infinite mind that governs all creation. You will feel its pulse in every opportunity, its whisper in every challenge. You will recognize that nothing happens to you. Everything happens for you to teach, to refine, to align. And you will walk through life calm, deliberate, and powerful. You will stop arguing with the world and begin commanding it not through volume, but through vibration, for the loud shout only what they fear. The silent transmit what they know. The world does not need more noise. It needs more listeners. The age of constant talking has birthed a famine of understanding. Men speak endlessly but hear nothing. They debate ideas they have never studied and criticize results they never earned. The wise man watches silently, learns quietly, and acts decisively. Be that man. Silence will teach you more than words ever will. It will teach you patience, precision, and presence. It will teach you how to respond instead of react, how to think instead of assume, how to move instead of drift. Silence refines character, noise exposes weakness. And one day, when you have practiced silence long enough, when you have listened deeply enough, you will begin to hear something beyond words, the sound of your own power awakening. It will not be loud, but it will be final. For when you truly stop talking and listen, you will realize that success was never hidden, only unheard. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when words no longer suffice. When the lectures have been heard, the books read, the mentors followed, and yet still the world remains unmoved. It is in that silence, that sacred pause, that the truth reveals itself. Your greatest teacher has been waiting inside you all along. It was never the noise of the world that blinded you. It was your own. Every answer, every strategy, every principle of success has been whispered within you since the beginning. But you cannot hear a whisper while you are shouting your doubts. You cannot receive instruction while you are arguing with wisdom. You cannot rise to mastery while you are enslaved by your own commentary. Stop talking. Listen. In that command lies the gate to every higher power. For listening is not the absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness. It is that heightened state where perception sharpens and every thought, every breath, every heartbeat becomes a revelation. The man who listens this deeply ceases to be reactive and begins to be creative. He is no longer moved by emotion, but moves the world through understanding. There is no power like that of a calm mind. It is not dramatic, but it is unstoppable. It does not panic in crisis, it observes. It does not rush in ambition, it designs. It does not beg for opportunity, it creates it. The universe itself bends to those who can remain still in motion, composed in chaos, listening while others shout. You will know you have reached mastery when you no longer need to convince anyone of it. Your very presence will speak more than your words ever could. Silence becomes authority. Detachment becomes gravity. Discipline becomes magnetism. You will walk into rooms and the energy will shift, not because you spoke louder, but because you radiate certainty. That is the fruit of inner discipline. Unshakable calmness, grounded conviction, and a quiet strength that nothing external can imitate. Do not seek applause, seek alignment. The world may not understand your stillness, but results will announce you. Every master was once a student of silence. They observed before they acted, studied before they spoke, reflected before they decided. The man who rushes speaks to be heard. The man who listens speaks to transform. You must decide which you will be. When you stop talking, you begin to build the inner architecture of command. You stop reacting to the noise of others and start designing the structure of your own empire. You begin to realize that success is not an explosion, it is an orchestration. It is the symphony of right thoughts, timed action, and calm perseverance. That is why emotional detachment is indispensable. It keeps you steady when others tremble, rational when others rage, patient when others panic. Detachment is not coldness, it is composure. It is the discipline that protects your power from waste. The emotionally reactive man spends his life correcting his outbursts. The emotionally disciplined man spends his life creating his destiny. One is drained by conflict, the other is driven by purpose. The world will test your detachment. It will provoke, mock, and challenge you. It will tempt you to react, to defend, to explain, but each test is an invitation to mastery. Every time you choose silence over reaction, you rise higher. Every time you respond with reason instead of rage, you ascend another level of power. The one who cannot be provoked cannot be controlled. And the one who cannot be controlled controls all. This is why your greatest victories will never be visible to others. They will occur in your own mind in the quiet moments when you choose peace over pride, patience over panic, law over impulse. These invisible victories form the unseen empire from which all external success flows. For success is not what you acquire, it is what you become. It is not the house, the title, the applause. It is the disciplined mind, the serene spirit, the unwavering will. It is the mastery of self that commands every field, every fortune, every future. So, stop talking, listen. Listen to your failures. They are teaching you. Listen to your discomfort. It is refining you. Listen to your solitude. It is strengthening you. Listen to the silence. It is speaking of destiny. Every voice of growth speaks in whispers. When you quiet your emotions, you will hear opportunity calling. When you silence your fears, you will hear faith rising. When you mute your ego, you will hear wisdom guiding. And when you learn to hear these voices clearly, success becomes inevitable. There is no longer resistance between you and your potential, only rhythm. You will move through life with a grace that others mistake for luck. You will anticipate shifts before they occur. You will feel guided, not by impulse, but by law. This is the inner kingdom, the throne of control, the temple of peace. Every thought becomes a servant. Every emotion becomes a soldier. Every action becomes a decree. And at the center of that kingdom, there is silence, the silence of perfect order, perfect vision, perfect mastery. You no longer need to talk about greatness, you live it. You no longer chase recognition, you radiate presence. You no longer seek approval, you are approval made flesh. You will see that true success was never about reaching the top, it was about reaching yourself. When the noise of the world fades, the sound of truth remains. And that truth, once heard, will guide you forever. So stop talking and listen, not as a command from another, but as a covenant with yourself. For the man who listens to truth commands his fate. The man who listens to law shapes his destiny. The man who listens to himself hears the voice of God. Listen until the noise dissolves into clarity. Listen until confusion becomes conviction. Listen until your mind is no longer your enemy, but your instrument. Then and only then speak. And when you speak, let your words be few but final. Let them be carved from conviction, tempered by silence, and backed by discipline. For words born of silence create worlds. Speak not to be heard, but to build. Speak not to impress, but to instruct. Speak not to argue, but to awaken. Your life will be your loudest speech. Your results will be your greatest volume. Your calm will be your crown. And when the world asks how you became so steady, so strong, so unstoppable, you will smile and say nothing. Because the secret was never in the talking, it was always in the listening.